Hi, everyone. My name is Aaron Gravesdale. I'm a solution engineer here at PDFTron. And so today's webinar, I'm going to sort of discuss the role of WebViewer and PDFTron's technology in general within the AEC space. First I'm going to sort of give an introduction to WebViewer. Then I'm going to go into the importance of fast and accurate rendering within AEC spaces, the importance of creating consistent UIs for users, ways to improve collaboration, and then how PDFTron's review and approval workflows can fit in. Now, as I'm giving this webinar, oh, I see some people are saying they are unable to hear me. Let me see if I can crank up the volume here. Okay, I've increased the volume here a bit. Please let me know if you're having any trouble hearing me. Oh, some other people are saying they are able to hear. So yeah, hopefully this. Okay, great. So it looks like we're able to hear just fine nowadays. Okay, cool. So yeah, I'm sort of just going to go over those few topics. But to start, what I was going to do was sort of talk a bit about WebViewer and how that fits into PDFTron's product line. PDFTron was started a couple of decades ago in the late 90s, right around the time that the PDF specification was first published. And our initial product line was something called PDFTron PDF SDK, which is a native toolkit that we developed in C++ and ported over to a variety of platforms. So initially it was a Windows toolkit that we ported over to Linux and Mac OS, as well as Android and iOS. Along the way, we added wrappers for various languages, C, C++, C#, Java, as well as languages like Objective-C, Kotlin, et cetera, et cetera. And what we did a couple of years ago was we took a native toolkit, which we had been building up over the years to cover the entire document lifecycle, from document creation, conversion from other formats, to processing of documents, especially PDFs, to sort of usage interactively of documents, form filling and annotation, for example, as well as kind of finalization of documents like signing PDFs or redacting PDFs or converting to archive formats like PDFA. What that enabled us to do, what compiling that native toolkit over to Java enabled, was for us to provide that same breadth of functionality, but entirely within the browser. So that's without having to do the processing server side, but also without having to run anything native on the client side. So without having to run any sort of native plugins or native applications or anything along those lines. So now that browser makers have started to deprecate native plugins, this JavaScript-based solution has become something that is now applicable in a lot of different scenarios. So what I'm going to do today is kind of just go through WebViewer and demo it. We have a live demo on our site here. So if you go to documentation, web, and then launch demo, that will launch up our live demo where you can load up your own documents and try them out. But we also have a lot of interesting stuff on this website as well. So under documentation and web, if we go to overview, this is where all of our guides for different scenarios for using WebViewer and all of our toolkits, actually. That's where all of these guys live. So we have guides stepping through different scenarios, as well as some sample code, API references, the change log, so you can see what's changed in recent versions, and our download as well. So you can download the toolkit yourself and get started with it and run it locally. We have guides here under getting started for how to go about doing so. And the samples I'm going to be looking at here today are going to be kind of a mix of that. So I've actually set up WebViewer here locally on my machine. So some of the samples will be from that. And then we can also take a look at what's available in our web viewer demo as well. So if you'd like to try any of these samples out for yourself, they're all available for you here. You can go online and try them yourself. And as well, the webinar here today will be recorded. Someone was asking about that in the chat. So you should receive a link to a recording after the call, so that way you can forward it on to anybody else who might want to check this webinar out and be aware of these features. So recently we've been adding quite a few new functionalities into WebViewer targeted at the AEC space. And that's because we've heard a lot from customers within this space. It's architecture, engineering, and construction is an area where digital transformation is really starting to pick up. There's a lot of need for handling documents electronically because what tends to happen in practice is that people who need to look at documents, whether they're architects or people in the field, really need to reference these documents all the time, and especially the latest version of them. And if they don't have really solid tools for working with documents electronically, what we hear again and again is that end users will fall back to printing out documents physically because that's a very convenient method for them. It's very easy for them to work with paper documents, at least at first, but of course that approach doesn't scale. It can be very problematic because different people working on a job site might have different copies of a blueprint that they're looking off of, and so some of those might be out of date. And additionally, if any changes need to be made, it's important that everyone involved get up to the minute, accurate information about what should actually be built on a job site. So moving to a more electronic workflow, it really can help reduce the errors that happen during the construction process, make sure everyone is on the same page, and keep everyone up to date very quickly. So WebViewer is really centered around that. Now, WebViewer, as I mentioned, is purely JavaScript. So it's running here entirely inside of the browser. And how WebViewer works is that it downloads bytes of documents from the server and renders them here within the browser. So the processing of, for example, a PDF document and converting that into a visible image, that's all functionality that's happening here within the client-side browser, and that offers quite a few advantages to other approaches. For example, rendering the document server side and just sending images down. And one of the big advantages is in the quality of rendering. So since I have a true PDF document here, what I can do is what that means is that when I zoom into the document, fine-grained details are still rendered accurately. So I'm not just dealing with, say, like an image that was converted from a PDF at a fixed resolution. Instead, I have the PDF document that can be zoomed into whatever resolution I want, and that can be a big deal for construction documents. So, for example, if I'm looking at this blueprint here and I want to see some of the fine-grained details inside of the document, if I'm just looking at an image or even a printed copy that isn't very large, then I'm going to really miss a lot of those details. Another thing that's important is that the document be able to be rendered very quickly, no matter what its size. Sometimes we might be dealing with scanned documents with gigantic images inside of them, or we might be dealing with documents with lots of little fine-grained lines inside of them. And so, it's important that whatever PDF rendering solution I have is able to start rendering the documents right away as the users want to view them, and that it preserves all that accurate information inside of the document and renders it correctly and consistently across different platforms. WebViewer is able to do that exceptionally well because it's the same code running on whatever platform you happen to be using. And since PDFTron offers native toolkits that use the exact same rendering code, that means that you can get very consistent cross-platform rendering from our different toolkits. So here, for example, these very thin lines, might be rendered differently based on different viewers. So for example, zero width lines inside of PDF documents, which are very common inside of construction documents, those can be rendered differently by different viewers. If you use different rendering engines for different clients in your software suite, then that's something that can lead to the documents being rendered differently for different users, and then some disagreements about why certain things were built a certain way on a job site. So that can be something that's a bit problematic. So by having consistent rendering across the board, that's something you can clamp down on and make sure that everyone is literally working off of the same page. Just a bit about that, WebViewer does support mobile as well. So we have a responsive interface that's meant to accommodate whatever screen size the user has or whatever orientation the viewer's at. So with WebViewer, you can deploy essentially a single document rendering solution, both on the web and embedded within mobile apps. And WebViewer fully supports offline mode as well. So as a result, if your users are working on job sites where connectivity might be a bit spotty, typically on a job site, internet connectivity happens through maybe a Wi-Fi router inside of a trailer on the job site. So it can be very tricky to get consistent internet access on the job site, so it's very important to support offline mode as well, and so that's why we were sure to bake that into WebViewer from the start. Now, in addition to well, back a bit to rendering very quickly. So WebViewer supports a feature called linearization of PDF documents. And what that is a way that you can save PDF files so that they can be very efficiently rendered. What this is addressing is opening very large documents and having them be navigable immediately. So a lot of times on underpowered PDF viewers, if you open the document, you might have to wait a while before you see the first page or before you're able to jump to random pages inside of the document. But because WebViewer supports linearized PDF documents, what it can do is be a bit judicious about the bytes that it's downloading from the document. When we linearize a PDF document, that means that the bytes for each page are all grouped together. So when WebViewer is rendering an arbitrary page or when it's first opening a document, what it can do is just download a subsection of all of the bytes of the file. So instead of downloading this gigantic file and waiting for potentially gigabytes of data to stream down into the browser, what WebViewer can do is just download that sliver of the file that it actually needs to render whatever is currently visible on screen. And so as a result, the overall rendering process can be much more efficient. So you don't have to wait for the entire file to download before you see anything. And also it works much more efficiently on underpowered browsers, such as mobile browsers, that have a very limited amount of memory footprint that they can handle. With those browsers especially, it's important that we not download an arbitrary number of bytes, but instead we just download a finite number of bytes, a relatively small amount of data to hold inside of the browser's memory at any time. And that's exactly what WebViewer is able to do. Here's a 13,000 page document. So when we open this up, we jump right to the first page, and that can download, essentially right away once those bytes are downloaded for that first page. And then what we can do is jump to an arbitrary location in the document. And once we do that, WebViewer is able to discard the bytes that it's already downloaded, and now it's downloading these new bytes and can render those. So even though we're flipping through this gigantic document, the actual memory footprint of the browser can stay constant. And that additionally lets us handle very large files as well. So here we have a 2 gigabyte file, and we can load that directly into the browser as well. And again, this kind of file size is not uncommon when working with construction documents, especially very large scans that can happen with documents that are faxed, or when someone snaps a picture of them and emails that around. So you can be working much of the time with very large images, and so WebViewer is certainly capable of grappling with documents of that size. Now, another nice feature besides the efficient rendering, another nice feature of rendering the PDF document directly in the browser is that we can support some of the extra features that are in the PDF format. So we can still continue to support layer separation. So many construction documents have different layers baked into them, different optional content groups, as they're called in the PDF specification, so that we can turn off different parts of the document when it's rendering. For example, if I were a plumber and I were going onto a job site and I were using this blueprint as a way of understanding the plumbing of a building, just as it is right now, it's rather confusing to look at. There's quite a lot of extra information here that comes from equipment and electrical and HVAC information. So all of these extraneous lines are things that I might not need to know about as a plumber and could just confuse me and slow me down. So by being able to toggle those different layers directly in the browser, that simplifies things dramatically for me, and I can get a much clearer view of where the relevant plumbing information actually is on the document. So that can make me work more efficiently and with fewer errors. So that can be kind of a nice win. And we're able to toggle these off and on without having to jump back to any sort of server-side rendering, since this is all done inside of the client-side browser. So when I toggle these, it's effectively happening right away. I'm not having to wait for some sort of conversion into image that takes some unbounded amount of time. Someone was asking where these layers come from and whether these are Revit layers or something else. So that depends on how the document is created. You can bake them into any sort of PDF file, whether that's created from Revit or some other program. And so a lot of that, whether you have these kinds of layers baked in, comes from converting from other file types often. So if you have different layers that are defined in Revit or DWG or other formats, when converting those into PDF, potentially you could carry those same layers over and then be able to toggle them on the fly. We see these also with product packaging solutions as well. This need to be able to toggle different layers on and off. And one other nice thing about having the actual PDF document is that if there is text on that document, then we can still continue to treat it as text. So for example, if you have P&ID information on a blueprint or things of that nature, text that you need to be able to search within the document, WebViewer is able to support that too. So it has built-in search capabilities because we're able to extract text from the document. So we can search for text that's present on the file. We can even get a list of all the results as well as the ambient text, the sort of surrounding text for each of the search hits. Or we can extract all the text from a document. This is very useful for making the file more accessible. So if you wanted to make that information available to somebody who maybe was disabled or had difficulty reading, and you wanted to drive this information through some sort of screen reading program or text-to-speech solution, that could be possible. Or building up a full text index of a series of documents so that we can effectively kind of Google across a set of files and very quickly come across the particular document that we're looking for. Sometimes also a lot of the navigation performed on construction documents or submittals or other kinds of files is done through links, and WebViewer does support links and bookmarks. Here in this document, for example, we have some PDF outlines here baked into the document. And you know, as you see, we support clicking on those and jumping to a particular location in the file. And the same mechanism is how we can support links within the document. So if you have you know, some sort of hyperlink in the file that maybe points to another page, or even points to another PDF document, or just an arbitrary URL, we support all of those within WebViewer, both locations and named destinations as well. So those are some of the features that sort of help out with rendering in general with WebViewer. Now, besides PDF files, we have support for quite a few others as well. Here inside of our gallery, we show our support for docx, pptx, and xlsx files directly within inside WebViewer. So if you know, within your job site, you do have some information that's stored in those files, WebViewer can render them directly. And if you get scans and faxes in, so files in image format, WebViewer is able to load those directly as well. It can load those up, and then you can actually download them again as a PDF copy. So that's fully supported. And as well, within our server-side components, we have the ability to OCR images too. So you could pass in a scan of a document that has some text on it, and then our toolkit can turn that into a PDF document that contains that image and has searchable text laid over it. So that way, you know, if you get, say, for example, invoices that are faxed over, you can turn those into searchable documents and derive a lot more value from them than simply working with an image that can't be searched or converted into text. We also have support for CAD files in our server-side toolkit. So our native toolkit has hooks to be able to convert DWG, DGN, DXF, DWF, and RVT files into PDF copies that you can then view inside of WebViewer. So that enables you to provide essentially a consistent UI for all of those different file types for users. So, you know, whichever kind of document that I'm loading here, I still have the same ability to zoom in, to control the page layout, how the documents transition from one page to another, and support for consistent annotations across the board, as well as consistent collaboration across all of my different document types. And that UI is entirely customizable as well. So let's take a look here at some of the UI customization that's available. Here in this sample, what we've done is added in some extra buttons here that let us kind of configure WebViewer on the fly. So this is just kind of an extra thing that we've added for the showcase. This isn't what users normally see. But it's kind of giving us you know, hints about how we can go about modifying this UI. So for example, if we wanted to remove download and print, maybe text selection as a way of locking down document context, that's something that we can do inside of WebViewer. And it's just a few lines of code to do so. So we just, you know, are disabling these items from the UI. We have rich UIs for disabling these different elements. And we can disable certain annotation tools as well. So we could turn on and off. Let me see if I can make this a bit bigger so it's a little more obvious that they're going on and off. Turn off different text tools, for example, or freehand drawing, or maybe signature or eraser. And that way we could just leave, maybe if our users just have a few different kinds of annotations that they need to work with, what we can do is slim down the available annotations just to make it a little more error-proof, you know, so people don't have to think as much when they're grappling with the UI. We can just give them, you know, a very streamlined user experience that is going to keep them from making any mistakes as they're editing the document. Someone was asking, can we create a hyperlink and an annotation in the document? And that's absolutely the case. So here we can add say like a rectangle annotation on top of the file, and we can actually make a hyperlink here directly in the UI. So I can I can click on this, and then I can link to another page in the file. Although in this document, there's only one page, unfortunately. But I could, for example, add in a URL to Google, and that makes this this annotation kind of a hyperlink that can then bounce me over to wherever I'm linked to. And we also support existing annotations that are already there inside of the document. That's something that we hear about quite a bit, where clients of ours have an existing library of PDF documents with links that are already set up between different pages. Maybe you have like a blueprint on one page with links to the different pieces of equipment that would be required to be installed there. And so, we can support those kinds of documents out of the box. You don't have to go through and rewrite all of your PDF documents to support that kind of linking. In addition to turning off different annotations, we can also make new custom annotations too. We have some samples sort of showing that. One of the simplest is just adding a stamp. So here what we've done is just taken an approved image here and made a stamp out of that, stamping that image file. And we can customize how this looks too. So if we wanted to upload a different image, set the width to whatever we wish, and we can also do things like change the opacity. So that you can continue to see the content underneath the stamp. And this is all customizable as well, so you can use whatever image you like. Or if you'd like to make more complicated annotations, that's possible too. So for example, here we have a triangle tool that we've added in. This is not a very common shape for users to need, but it's one that we've sort of added in as a way of demonstrating that you can make your own annotation shapes quite easily and have them behave however you wish. We have a variety of kind of the standard construction annotations built in. Let me bring up a blueprint here. That might be a little easier to see on that one. So for example, you can make cloudy annotations that let you demonstrate to users that a certain area of the document needs further review. But one common request we get is to be able to customize these existing annotations and make them a little more powerful. For example, as you add in an annotation here, what you might want to do is automatically have that go back and trigger some piece of JavaScript code that maybe adds a new task into a back-end workflow system, or otherwise, communicates with other systems so that everyone can be on the same page about a given state on the diagram. So for example, let's say that I was enclosing this in a cloud to be able to demonstrate that this is an erroneous piece of equipment, something that needs to be repaired, something like that. So what I could do when presenting that to users, I could make a new cloudy annotation that's maybe one that's called a problem or needs repair or something like that. And so that way I can tie a given state to this task and essentially drive collaboration that way. That's something that can be controlled through custom JavaScript code that you add into these annotations, or in our latest version, we've added in the ability to tie annotations to given states. So it looks like it's not showing up in this one, but let me bring it up inside of this sample here in a second. So as I annotate a given document, what I can do here in the comment is add in an annotation state. There we are. So by default, we have states like accepted, rejected, canceled, completed, etc. So those can all be fully customized. You can set whatever annotation states you wish onto an annotation. And what that can enable you to do is help drive the workflow for each of these annotations that have been added onto a document. We've seen this with some office collaboration systems that enable people to comment on different parts of the document and then have states like accepted or rejected. And what this can do is enable everyone to see the current state of each of the tasks that have been created for this document, and kind of get everyone on the same page in terms of reviewing and approving, a part of that document or tasks that have been made based on the state of the job site. So this can be very effective as a way of keeping everyone on the same page. Looks like we have a couple of questions. So someone was saying, typically the cloud annotation is a rectangle. Do you have this? For example, if I draw a rectangle and I want to make it bigger, can we actually do that? So currently our cloud is based on a polygon annotation. And if we wanted to edit this, we could certainly make this bigger. So for example, I can expand out the points or shrink them based on whatever is needed. And we can add cloudy appearances onto other kinds of annotations too. So if you wanted to take a rectangle annotation and make that into a cloudy annotation, that would certainly be possible as well. But by default, we've just tied it to the polygon annotations. Now, in addition to being able to tie states onto different tasks, some of the other ways that we improve collaboration between users are through these comment threads here. So let me bring up another document here. So as I make a comment on a document, I can have a given user context associated with that. So for example, here, I'm logged in as, or I set up as the Sally user. So when Sally makes an annotation, let's say highlight some text here, you can see here in the comment thread that Sally is added as a user context. And we've also extracted the text automatically from the file and populated that comment. Other people can come in and comment on this as well. So for example, this Justin user could come in and say, review this. And that's added onto that same comment thread. Justin could also come in and set the annotation state as well. Set as accepted by Justin. So that way other users can come in and review the current state of a task and say whether something should be accepted or rejected or not. Someone was asking whether you can add or modify the custom states, and indeed you can. So we have APIs for taking these and adding in your own set of states. And that way you can essentially sort of model what's going on the job site and tie that closely with what the user sees. So whatever their steps are for a given task, you can copy that within your annotation states. Now, another thing that's sort of interesting about the way we've set up this sample is that it shows some of the different permissions that are available for different users too, that you can kind of toggle. So initially we logged in as the Sally user. Now Sally is just an ordinary user. Sally isn't an administrative user or a read-only user. An administrative user can see and edit everyone else's annotations. So Justin is set up as an administrative user. So we just sort of set up that string as the logged in user. WebViewer itself doesn't do any user management or permissions or authentication or anything like that. Rather, it tries to offload that so that you can manage those things however you'd like. Really, if you want to set up a given user as being the currently logged in one, that's just a matter of setting that string for describing who the current annotating user is. And that's also where we set up things like whether a user is administrator or read-only. Someone was asking about the server component. So the question was that PDFTron seems to have a server and a client component for the viewer. Do we need the server component for the viewer? And the server component is entirely optional. It's really just there to speed up document display and to add support for additional file types or browser types that are unsupportable without a server-side component. But most of the time, running modern browsers, you can just run that purely client-only. And that includes both this viewing and annotation piece, as well as things like editing the document inside of the browser. Generally, when our clients are first trying out WebViewer, we recommend starting with client-only evaluation, so that way you're not working with a server component and working to deploy that if you don't actually need to use it. And if your users are running relatively modern browsers, things like Chrome or Firefox or Safari, then typically client-only operation works quite well. If your users need to support older browsers like IE, then sometimes WebViewer Server is a good idea. But you can certainly set up client-only viewing with any browser type, and then see what the performance is actually like on the documents that your customers use. So that way you can actually get a clear idea of whether it's really needed or not. And that way you can have a faster proof of concept by just deploying fewer components. Someone else was asking what happens to those states if you convert the file to a local PDF. Can you still view those states on the PDF? And that depends a lot on the kind of PDF viewer that you're using. So these are standard states as defined by the PDF specification. So for example, if you save them into a document and open that file up inside of a third-party viewer like Acrobat does support those annotation states, then you can see them and can modify them still. It's just as if you're viewing them inside of this viewer. Someone was asking, is there a way to highlight a component in a CAD drawing and link it to the activity or task? Maybe highlight 10 slabs and link it to a given task. So certainly you can link to things inside of the PDF document and tie that into a given activity or task. Essentially what we're talking about is making a PDF annotation on top of that page. So the question is whether you can highlight the component in a CAD drawing and highlight just that and get to the task. And that depends on the conversion of that document into a PDF. So the PDF format itself doesn't necessarily have any notion of a CAD component or a slab or something like that. So if it's located on a particular area of the page, what you can do is highlight that section of the PDF page and then link that to a given task. So if that approach works for you, that would be sort of the recommended approach. Cool. And would that approach work for you? I'm curious whether simply highlighting a given area of the PDF page would suffice. So, for example, being able to draw a cloudy annotation around a particular area. Okay, great. So it sounds like that would suffice as a workaround. And again, any of our annotations in the latest release can have links associated with them directly, so that makes that a little easier to do. But also, it is possible to put JavaScript into the custom parts of an annotation. Here in our guides, we have some steps walking through how to make your own custom annotations. So this is kind of working through how to go about making your own triangle annotation as an example. And what it does is provides the source code to how you go about creating the different parts of the annotation. And in here, when it's being created, you could add in JavaScript code to call out to some backend system. We also have an event that's called every time an annotation is changed. So whenever you add or remove or modify an annotation, this annotation changed event gets called. So what you can do is add in just a simple callback, and then whenever an annotation is modified, you can call into a backend system and say that now we've created a new task annotation, or there's a new problem that's been found, or some issue has been resolved. The question was whether the SDK can expose some conversion APIs to link the components. Potentially, and that might be something, if you have a particular document that you're hoping to support, that maybe we can take a look at internally. That would be great to forward on to our support department. So actually, during your evaluation, PDFTron does offer full support prior to purchasing anything from us. You can reach out to support@pdftron.com, or go here on our site to support and resources, and then go to free trial tech support here. And if you fill out some information and feel free to drop in any attachments, then we can take a look at the document that you're looking at, and if you describe what you'd like to actually link, and how you'd like that to work, we can see either whether there's something in our conversion that we can customize to make that possible, or potentially if there's some post-processing that our toolkit can perform to automatically link some information or otherwise process the file. That could be an option as well. One big advantage of having this full-featured toolkit inside of the browser here is that we can customize really anything about how it behaves. So even, for example, as it's loading up a document, when we're first opening that, what we can do is use our low-level APIs to modify it. Or as we're doing things like saving the document, we can use our APIs to modify that as well. So if you're, for example, we have sample code showing how to flatten annotations as you're downloading them. So that way, if you want to export a copy of the document but not leave the annotations modifiable, so if you wanted to maybe save a copy off for archiving or to kind of create a checkpoint of the current state of the job site, this is a good way to do so. You can effectively take all of the annotations that have been made and flatten them into uneditable PDF content. And that could all happen automatically inside of the browser. You can write code specifically to remove certain kinds of annotations, flatten other ones. And effectively, you could do really anything you wanted to. Convert the document to PDFA, merge in documents or pages from another document, add a watermark or add encryption. Really, whatever you'd like to do is possible using our toolkit. We have many more of these samples here available, packaged with WebViewer, showing lots of different kinds of functionality, not just this low-level functionality, but also some additional things that could be useful within an AEC context. And actually, one of those that I wanted to show is our document diffing capabilities. So what we've created is a sample that shows how to take 3 WebViewer instances and show them on the same page. When what we can do is synchronize the zoom and scrolling of WebViewer across all 3 instances. Here I'm zooming into this left one, and those zoom and scroll events are propagated to the other instances of WebViewer here. And what I'm showing here are two versions of the same document. So here we have the version before over on the left and the version on the right. And then here in the middle, we're doing a pixel by pixel image diff of the rendered versions of these two documents. And so anything that's been added in is highlighted as blue, and anything that's been removed is highlighted as red. So that way, at a glance, you can quickly see what's changed between two versions of the same document. And the pain point that we're trying to address there is when someone on the job site gets two versions of the same blueprint and something subtle has changed between them. If they're just looking at the PDF copies, or even worse, just a piece of paper, it might be very difficult to see what's changed between the two of them. So having the ability to diff between those two copies of the document can really help make it easier to see instantly what exactly has changed. And we've been customizing this diff tool quite a bit based on feedback from our clients. So we've added in some tools to make it easier to adjust these at a fine-grained level. So for example, one very common case is where you have an existing blueprint and then someone has faxed you a new version of the blueprint. And maybe that's a little misaligned or at a slightly different scale, or something just happened when it was being faxed over. So now maybe it's slightly misaligned and rotated. So this tool here that we've added kind of lets us adjust that very slightly. So we can translate one of the documents that we're diffing relative to the other, or we can change the scale or rotate as needed. And that way we can very minutely address any differences between those two documents. We've also added in the ability to create an alignment between the two documents. So what we can do is draw arrows on each for the starting and end point. And these are then aligned on the same page based on those arrows. So this endpoint is matched up to this endpoint, and the beginning of the arrow is matched up to the beginning of the arrow on the other document. And that way we can overlay two documents over each other at whatever scale level we wish. And that can be very helpful when looking at blueprints that show the same thing but at different scales. So very often you'll have a larger blueprint of a city block and maybe a smaller blueprint of the building that might be built on that city block. Or you might have a blueprint of an office complex and then individual structures on that blueprint. And what you can do with this tool then is realign both of those blueprints so that you can overlay them on top of each other and make sure that those are in agreement. We've also added in the ability to turn off these as a difference and instead change the opacity to more easily see how things have changed. So this can be just another way of spotting the differences between each document. That might be a little easier to see from the original aligner. So that way I can, by seeing what pops out at different locations, that's another way that I can kind of instantly see what's changed between the two documents. And we also have the ability these days to download the middle panel image as well, just to have a preserved diff between the two. We have other diffing tools as well within our toolkits. Here on the sample, we have a way of merging two PDF documents together and overlaying them so that you can see the differences there. So this is just another option if that's a more convenient method for showing the differences between those two documents. That's possible too. Someone was asking I know this is a web viewer demo, but is this available in the desktop SDK for PDFTron? So this is something that we're adding into some of our desktop toolkits. Certainly, this capability here is definitely available on our desktop toolkits. This is merging two PDF documents and comparing them, and a lot of our features are available across toolkits. But that said, there are sometimes some things that have potentially gone into WebViewer that have not yet propagated out to other platforms in our SDK suite. Those are things that we're definitely looking to add into our desktop as well. And if those are things that are necessary for you, please do reach out to us, and we're certainly happy to accommodate the prioritization of features based on how urgently they're needed. And someone was asking if there's a batch option to do this in an entire set or multiple sheets. And this option absolutely could do this en masse with our software. So if you had a variety of PDF documents or folders of them, or just an unbounded number of them, we could certainly programmatically go through and generate these PDF comparisons. One other additional feature that I wanted to point out was our support for measurement annotations as well. So let me actually go to our demos again for that. So again, documentation, web, and launch demo. And here we have some of our measurement tools shown off. So for example, if I have a blueprint and I want to figure out the amount of material that should be allocated for various parts of the job. So for example, if I wanted to get the size of a doorway, what I can do is zoom into that and then draw arrows to determine the actual size of this doorway. Now notice that it's by default just measuring the size based on the PDF size itself. So it's just saying how big that is on the PDF page. But what I want to do is maybe change that to the actual scale that's inside of the document. So if this were, let's say, 3 feet, I could, let's say 3 feet. What I can do is calibrate that with a single annotation, and then later on, all of my measurements, any subsequent measurements that I'm making, also take that same scale into effect. And that way, if I have a scale listing here on a PDF document, I could measure that directly and immediately set the calibration for measurements that I'm taking on the document. Now, besides just a linear measurement, I can use our other tools as well. So, for example, I can do perimeter measurements here. So, if I wanted to see, the exact size of the perimeter of this room, I can just go through and make a polygon annotation around it, and that gets measured right away. So I can find out the perimeter. Or if I wanted to measure the area of a certain part of the document, I could do that as well through our polygon annotations. So here I can just measure directly and find out that the area here is 6 square feet. So that's something that can be added in virtually to any of our annotation types. Because these are so extensible, you could go in and change any sort of calculation that's made really to any annotation. We've also baked in the ability to snap to certain points as well. And here this is just sort of showing some of the different snap points that we were able to find in this particular document. We're able to extract the control points from inside of the PDF at a low level and use that to either directly give snap to points or calculate things like the midpoints of lines as places to snap to inside of a blueprint. so we can make the entire process much more straightforward and less error prone when measuring directly on a PDF document. And I should also mention that in addition to some of the customizations that I was talking about before, removing things from the UI or adding in new custom annotations, in addition to that, we do have our full UI source code posted onto GitHub. So it might just be easier to Google that. Your UI source. That's here on GitHub. So it's written in React-based JavaScript, and you can take this UI and fork this entirely, and therefore you can change around anything you like about this user interface. Anything about these buttons can be swapped out or reworked or rearranged based on whatever your users are expecting. And if you happen to have an existing UI that your users are used to, say you've already acclimated the end users to a particular way of working, that's something that we can accommodate as well. So we have this sample here that shows a third-party UI that we've taken. This was a library called Turn.js that we downloaded from GitHub. And basically, what we can do is present that third-party UI within WebViewer, or within a web page, and then the actual rendering of that document is something that WebViewer SDK is performing under the hood. So here we have just a document that we're viewing here, and WebViewer itself has performed the rendering of this PDF page into an image, and it just threw that image then into this third-party viewing code. And what that means is that you can still support however you're viewing documents today, but insert WebViewer SDK under the hood to do the rendering or to do more advanced PDF processing features. So that can be a very quick way to kind of improve the overall experience that your users are seeing without having to change anything about their workflow. So I think from my side that covers sort of all of the items that I wanted to get to today. So we talked about a lot of the important, fast, and accurate rendering within an AEC context. We talked about how creating a consistent user interface for users can really be enabled with WebViewer and enable them to move a lot more quickly within their work. We talked about how WebViewer can enable and support collaboration between different users, whether they're on mobile devices in the field or working on desktop systems in the back end. The ability to comment with each other and collaborate in real time, and the ability to review and approve different tasks within the workflow based on locations of the document that are annotated directly. So if you'd like to know more, please do feel free to reach out to us. You can get started with the toolkit yourself by downloading it from our site. But then please do feel free to reach out to us either through our support channels or by contacting PDFTron Sales. And if you do run into any roadblocks or have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We definitely want to work with people interested in our toolkit to make sure that they're able to get up and running rather than spinning their wheels. And someone was asking whether we have OCR. So OCR is baked into our native PDFTron SDK for the server. And again, what you can do is take images and send them into our toolkit, and we can return PDFs made from those images as well as the text. So the PDF is composed of the image with invisible searchable text laid over it. So that way, effectively you can have quite a usable document at your disposal. So if there are no further questions, I think that should do it for today. So thanks everyone for attending this webinar. I really appreciate it. I hope everyone is keeping safe, and yeah, if you have any questions, please do reach out to us.